So our agenda for today, what we're going to cover specifically, we're going to look at, going to start out in ArcGIS Pro, and we're going to look at importing BIM or CAD files. In this case, we're just going to focus on CAD files, although both can be brought into Pro. We'll also then move to publishing layers, those layers to ArcGIS Online after we get those into GIS format. And then we will look at updating attributes and schema through the ArcGIS Online interface. Then we will finally finish up with creating and configuring an ArcGIS dashboard with the data that we publish. So first of all, as we get into this and explore the functionality within ArcGIS Pro, we will start to look at bringing in these CAD files, and that's what I'll start with. I'm going to go ahead and move into Pro. Before I do that, though, I just want to point out some of the tools we will look at, specifically with ArcGIS Indoors. A few of these tools require ArcGIS Indoors licensing, and we will touch on that later. But for today, some of what we can also utilize can be done just without that to ArcGIS Online. So moving into ArcGIS Pro, what I've got here is a campus situation. It's a college campus we're looking at in this case. And I have already brought in some CAD files, as you can see here on the left, but I wanted to show what that looks like if I was adding CAD files into here. Now, what you might find as you navigate through your folders and you find these CAD files, they're going to look like this through your ArcGIS Pro dialog box. And what I wanted to point out is if I add this whole file, the DWG, I'm going to get a lot of different, items pop up in my table of contents. But if you expand this one more step, and you're going to see these 5 categories. And in this case, what I've done for this project is I've only imported the polygon and the polyline CAD, classes. So I did that just to simplify and not to clutter up my drawing. Once I bring those in, however, these are unlocated. They're not georeferenced. And so I wanted to point that out. What I'm going to do is zoom to where those are at. And you're going to see that these are somewhere off in space. And I'm going to change my base map just to make that easier to see. So these are, again, off in space. They don't have a coordinate system tied to them necessarily. So what we need to do first is georeference our CAD files. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, in this case, I'll select my wall feature layer there. And then I'm going to go up in the top menu and I'm going to select CAD data and then georeference. And actually, in this case, I want to go back to my project location, and I have a bookmark for where that's at. And so at my project location, let me turn on my imagery now. What I can do is using the georeference tools and features, I can then be able to manipulate that and georeference those layers to where I need them to be. So again, that's really handy to be able to update that and georeference that information. What that looks like, if I use this move to display, that's going to bring in my CAD file into the general area, and you'll notice it's not to scale or anything, but it gets it to my general location, general area. Then what I can do is use the move function under the georeference, and you can see how I can move that around. And then I can also use the scale. So I'm going to scale mine, and I can scale it either by dragging the box or, and you know what, let me change my base map here to make that a little easier to see. Okay, so I can either drag the box to scale it, or if I hit the shortcut, the letter A key, I can have a scale factor. In this case, if I want to put 0.5, I can do that, and it'll shrink that accordingly. And then under my georeference tab, again, I can move that to exactly where it needs to go. And of course, I would use my aerial imagery to get that dialed in very specific as to where I want that to be, located right on top of the building. So then once I'm done with my georeferencing, once I have that where I like it, I'm going to click Save. And that's going to create a couple extra files in the background, my CAD file is going to create a world file that basically provides that georeference information. What I'll also need to do then is specify a spatial coordinate system eventually. But that's kind of the process I wanted to walk you through just briefly on the georeferencing. So I'm going to close that for now. My georeferencing is going to say, hey, these are unsaved edits. Are you sure? And I'm going to say, yes, I want to continue without saving those. But that process is what's involved there with the georeferencing. But I already have my layers that I need. I've already georeferenced those, and I'm going to go to where those are located at. So let me zoom to layer here. And the next thing after we georeference, of course, we've got to get those into GIS format. And I just wanted to touch on what does this look like? And what I've done is I've used the ArcGIS Indoors data model. And I just want to show you briefly what that entails. So here, if we go back to the geodatabase level, I have a data set called Indoors, and then I've got some additional tables here. And if I double click and open up that feature data set, I've got all of these different feature classes that I want to get my CAD data into these feature classes. And that's the idea here, is to be able to field map, so to speak, or to map those CAD layers into the proper GIS layers here. Because we have to get them in, we have to get our CAD data. Once we georeference it, we got to get it into GIS format before we can publish it and build our space planning dashboard. So wanted to give an idea of what that looks like. Now, what I'm going to use in this case, I'm going to show you a couple tools. Again, these tools are something you would need to have some additional licensing for. You would want to have the ArcGIS Indoors licensing, but there are some really handy tools available. If I'm going to search geoprocessing tools for the word Indoors. And I've got one here for import floor plans to Indoors geodatabase. And this takes CAD files, floor plans, and imports those into a file geodatabase in the Indoors schema. I could also do a search if I wanted to for, if we wanted to look up BIM, and we could say BIM file to geodatabase. And this will give you a similar workflow, only working with BIM data. But in this case, I want to go back to the Indoors and floor plans. And that database I was showing you here, this was created using this create Indoors database. So that's kind of step one, but I wasn't including that as part of that since we're really focusing on how to get the data into GIS format. So again, we're going to run the import floor plans, and then I'm going to select my target units. And these are the GIS layers, the feature classes that we're going to be pulling our CAD data into. And as I populate those, I can select what represents my level, my levels and my facilities. Again, this is where it's going to. You can have sections and zones, you don't have to, but this is important. There's an Excel file template that is a part of this tool that they give you, a blank template, and you can populate the Excel file to specify what are the name of your CAD layers and where do those belong in your Indoors schema. And so this is something that I've already gone through and populated these and told it where those details exist in my CAD information. And that's really helpful when running this tool to be able to utilize that Excel template. In fact, it requires an Excel template. Otherwise, I just need to specify unit of measure and then whether I want geodesic or planar on the measurement mode. So once I do that, I'll run the tool. And if I've done everything correctly, it will automatically populate my data into the file geodatabase in the Indoors format here, which is what I have. Okay, so then once we're done with that, we run that tool, we import our data, then we just want to inspect it and take a look. If I look at my details, I can kind of see here, I've got 1,000 different features here in my details. In my units, I can open up the attribute table, and I've got about 24 different units. Units represent the room levels on my floor plan. Then I've also got levels and facilities, which I've just got one of those for now. But if I wanted to have multiple floors in this building, then I would need to do a little bit more work with establishing those levels and defining those. In this case, I'm just working with one level. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to look at publishing these layers to ArcGIS Online. So what's involved with that process, publishing layers to ArcGIS Online? Well, in order to share any content from ArcGIS Pro, I have to have an account that is part of an ArcGIS organization. And I have to have privileges within that organization to create, update, and delete content. So in my case, I'm signed into a portal, into my ArcGIS Online portal up here on the top right. And I have that, I know I'm signed in there. I could be signed into a portal for ArcGIS in an enterprise environment as well. But in this case, I'm utilizing ArcGIS Online. So what I want to do there is I can now share either my map as a whole, or I can share individual layers. And there's a couple different ways we can do that. So one, if I'm going to go ahead and remove my CAD files here. Okay. And then I'm just left with my layers, with my GIS layers, and I can then go to share on my menu in Pro, and I'm running Pro version 3.0, by the way. I can share it as a web map, or I can share it as individual web layers. So if I select a layer individually, and I can share that web layer out. The difference is if you share it as a web map, it keeps those layers grouped. So that's the method I'm going to go with today here as we kind of walk through this. So I've got my map, and I can update the name there. I can update a summary. Let's say Space Planner Demo. In my case, I'm going to put some tags on. I could say space planning in this situation for my tags. And then I can, here's something important. If I want this to publish to a web map directly, and I want to start using it right away, I want those layers to be editable. I want to select editable in this dropdown, because I want that to automatically be in a web map and all ready to go. And then I can save it in one of my folders or in the root location as I so choose. Then I want to make sure before I publish that I can click Analyze. And what it's going to do is it's going to raise any red flags that I need to address before I publish. And you can see that I've got one here. It says, wait a minute, unique numeric IDs are not assigned. And what's nice here is I can just right click and I can say auto assign sequentially. With the newer updates in ArcGIS Pro, they really make it user friendly to address some of these issues prior to publishing. Okay, then I'm just going to analyze one more time, and I'll see that those should be gone. And then I'm able to go ahead and share my data and publish that to ArcGIS Online. So one of the things, once I'm done here, once I share that, it'll give me a little pop-up on the bottom here. I can click on that, and it'll directly take me to my content on ArcGIS Online, which leads us to our next section. How do we update attributes and schema once we have our data published? So now I'm going to transition over to ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to look at my content. So in this case, let's say I have my web map that was just published, my Space Planner map, and that's what this would then look like. So once it's published, I can open that up in my ArcGIS Online organization, which I'm signed in here. And basically, I want to update some information in the data set, some schema information. I want to add some drop downs that you're going to see will be very valuable to us as we move towards creating a dashboard. In this case, I'm just worried about the units, and I'd like to go ahead and I'm going to show the item details on my units that I just published. And this is where I'm going to go to data, because I want to see the table and I want to see what my fields are. And what I need to do now, you can see I don't have any information on net square footage or like different departments. So I'm going to start by adding some fields to my newly published data here. So I'm going to click add. I'm going to go with a field name called department, and that's going to be a string. And I'm going to add that. It's going to create that new field. And then what I'm going to do is I go down and find that field I just created. I'm going to create a list. I want a drop-down list for the different departments that I'm going to use. Okay, so I'm going to start off with engineering. Then I'm going to add one called business. Then I'm going to add another one called medicine. And we will finally go with an unassigned category. Okay, so there's my list of drop downs that I want to have. I'm going to save that. So now I've got departments I can choose from as I click on my rooms, because again, that's my units layer. And I'd also like to add another field. If I close out of here, I can add another field. And this one's going to be called space ownership. Okay, and that's also going to be a string field. And what I want to do is space ownership. In this case, again, I'll scroll down and find that. And I want to create a list in here. And I'm going to use the word owned. And I'm going to use leased. And then I'll say other. And this is helpful for space managers that need to keep track of what property is owned by the organization or leased. And I can click save there. And lastly, I would like to add one more field. And this one I'm going to call net area. Okay, and I'm going to make this a double because this is going to be a number that's calculating directly from the GIS data. It's going to calculate the area of my rooms. So once it adds that, then we'll go in and what's with this, we don't need to create a list, but what we need to do is calculate the value of our square footage for each room. To do that, I'm going to go back to the table here. I'm going to scroll over and find that net area field. And you can see I don't have any information populated here yet for these new fields that I added. But I'm going to select my header and I'm going to go to calculate. In this case, I have an option to either use Arcade or SQL. Now, you don't have to be a professional coder or developer to be able to do some basic work with these fields. In this case, I'm going to use Arcade, and I'm going to paste in a little snippet of code here that I'm using in order to calculate that for those features. I'm going to take the area of each room, each feature, and I want to calculate that area in square feet, and I want it to round to the nearest single digit, nearest decimal. So I can test that here, make sure that's working, and then I can click OK. And what you see is it's calculating. I have 24 rooms in the layer I published. It's calculating all 24 of those. And I just have to do a little refresh here, and I should be able to see my information populated. If I scroll over, now I have my net area calculated for each room. So very helpful and handy way to be able to do that and get that information updated. Then I can go back to my space planner map. And one of the things I'll want to do, and you can see I've got configured symbology based on my different department, which is what I want. I want to be able to click on one, edit, and I want to be able to edit that department. So be able to update that, and the color should match accordingly. So I can say engineering and it'll change color accordingly with that. So then I'm going to save my web map. Okay, and now what I want to do, moving on to our next section, go back to our slides so we can kind of regroup, see where we're at. So the next step, what we want to do is create and configure an ArcGIS dashboard. This functionality is available just by having an ArcGIS online organizational account. And I'm going to create a dashboard from the web map that I have of my floor plan. The reason I want to create a dashboard is I want to start to introduce some charts and some data and some more information to help me in my decision making as I look at how to manage my spaces and look at the different areas. Okay. So we'll go back here to our web map. And in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click share. And here I can see I'm going to create a dashboard application. I'm going to select ArcGIS Dashboard when I create a new web app and give it a name. And it's got that information filled in already. So I'm going to click done. And what it's going to do is it's going to take my web map and it's putting it in the background, essentially kind of it's building a shell around it that allows me to create my dashboard with. So the next steps involved in creating this dashboard, now I can add elements. So at the top left, you can see where I can add elements. And as I hover over the different areas of my dashboard, it lets me add in what I need to. So we're going to add an element over here on the left-hand side. And let's say I would like a pie chart. I want to be able to see particularly my units, and I want to be able to start to visualize these by my different departments. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to leave it on group values, and I'm going to say I would like to use department. And right now you can see they're all null because I have none of them populated. But next I would go to my slices, and I can change information here. I can change colors, any information I need to. I can load categories. I can apply different color schemas there. In this case, let's just give it a little bit more color here. No, that didn't work, but we can have some tools there available for us to update that. So let's go ahead and I'm also going to do one more thing under title. Let's say I want to give my pie chart a title, and I'm just going to call this one space utilization percentage. And I'm going to change this to say heading 3 because I want to make it a little bigger, and let's center that. Then I can click done. And now you'll see I have a very large pie chart, but what we're going to do is we're going to add another element here. And this one I'm going to add below my pie chart. And this time I want to do a serial chart. I want to see my data represented in a little different fashion. I'd like to see it more in like a graph. And I also want to see some specific square footage numbers tied to that. So I'm going to do a serial chart. And again, I have to select my layer. So I'm going to go with the units here. And again, I have to tell it which category do I want to look at. So I want to break it down by department. Okay, and you can see that automatically populates. Again, I have all of mine are null values currently. And then I'm going to go to update my title, which I can find under general. And again, I'll put that title in there, and we'll make it a heading 3. And again, I'm going to center that. Okay, and then series information, I can do by category here on my colors. So you can get a kind of a variety there. Again, if we just update the null, we'll see that update as well. So there I've got a couple basic elements created that really are ready to be utilized and updated. So let me go ahead and save my dashboard. So let's save that. And let's see what happens if we would make an update to our web map. If we go back here, let's see, it looks like we've got to go back to our, let's go back to our web map here. And I'm going to open this in Classic Viewer. You could use the new ArcGIS Online Map Viewer, but some of the items I'm using today, I wanted to just remain in the Classic Viewer to be able to show you what those look like. But let's make sure I've got editing enabled. I do on my units. And we're going to select one of these. We're going to edit it. And I'm going to change this to engineering. We'll save that one. Make sure that updated. And then I'm going to pick another one. And we'll say this one will make a different business, we'll say. Okay. Then I'll save my map there. And then what I'll do is come back to my space planner, and we'll do a refresh there. And now we see my data is updated. So now I've got percentages updated on space utilization. I can see business and engineering are now using some space. I can also see them in my chart below as I look at my net square footages. And I could also add my square footage numbers in there if I wanted to edit the settings on that. I can come in here and have under my series, I can be able to add labels on these. So I think this is under, I don't remember exactly which category these, but we can add labels so it shows our numbers here. I'll show you a completed dashboard with those in there here in a minute. So those are the basics of what you can do for creating the ArcGIS dashboard from the floor plans that we had just published. Okay, so next, what I'd like to do is just review some additional Esri indoor mapping solutions. As you heard me mention earlier, ArcGIS Indoors. They do have indoor maps. ArcGIS Indoors Maps is available as an extension. These used to be combined. However, now they've separated these out, which is really nice. There's another one for indoor spaces, and that uses the ArcGIS Indoor Space Planner. That has some more robust functionality from what I'm showing here today. Also, keep in mind, if you want to take advantage of your maps being what we call floor aware, like Esri allows you to have really user-friendly toggles for which floor you're looking at, you do need the ArcGIS Indoors solution enabled for that. Also, ArcGIS IPS, that's the indoor positioning system. It allows you to basically locate yourself and others inside the building. You can see your blue dot, so to speak, on the map. So that is available as well. That can be utilized with either ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS. Now, something to keep in mind is you see I have a little fine print down here on the bottom. ArcGIS Indoor Spaces is an add-on to the ArcGIS Indoors Maps licensing. And so you cannot have the spaces without having the indoor maps enabled. And as far as prerequisites, you can see here on the right, you do need ArcGIS Pro 2.6 or later. I would really recommend 2.8 or later. And then also ArcGIS Online Organization or Portal for ArcGIS 11.0 or later. You need those, have to be licensed to use ArcGIS Indoors with. So that's important to make a note of. There's a user type licensing for ArcGIS Pro, and then you have to have your organization enabled for Indoors usage. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to us. I know that can be a little bit confusing, or we can also connect you with your Esri account manager as well. And lastly, I would like to just show a couple, one particular just example, since we're running low on time here. I am just going to pull up this example to show you what the finished product might look like. Here I've got, it's called Campus Space Manager. And this is kind of showing you a facility that they have the different spaces broken out by college. And I did want to give you an example here. If I want to just isolate and see which college I'm interested, I could click on these in my pie chart and it'll isolate just that particular one I'm interested in. But you can see I've got percentage of utilization, and I also have net square footage down here on the bottom. If I want to go about changing one of these, in this case, I'm just going to hit edit. That's going to take me to my editor application. And then I can simply update one of my rooms. So if we come in here, let's say, in this case, let's say that the veterinary school is growing and they're going to take over some more space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select several rooms here. And let's say I want these to be changed to the School of Veterinary Medicine. We'll save those. And let's do just a few more here. And let's say they're going to take over that space as well. And as we go back, we'll close that. As we go back to our dashboard and we hit the refresh button, we will see that our numbers have updated and also our square footage to reflect that in addition to our map. So now I have a new percentage. I've got new square footage compiled in my chart below. And I can see that again as I click on any of these. I can isolate just what that particular college has need of. As I zoom in, I can see more detail on my indoor maps, and I can also select individual rooms and be able to find exact square footage for that room if I want to make decisions on somebody else using that space. So very valuable use cases there for those.